Commander Jake Sullivan walked across the cold metal floor of his ship. The stars outside the window looked the same as always, but something felt different today. His ship, the Defiance, was not the biggest or strongest in space, but it was home to him and his crew. Jake stopped at the main control room and looked at the big screen. Another human transport ship was moving slowly toward the jump gate. The ship looked damaged and tired, just like the people inside it. These were human families running away from their homes again. Amy Rodriguez sat at her workstation and turned to look at Jake. Her face showed worry and anger. She'd been working on the ship for 5 years and had never seen things this bad. "Commander, I have bad news from 17 different star systems," Amy said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "The Corithians want more food from us. They used to take 30% of everything we grow, now they want 40%. Jake felt his hands make fists. He knew what this meant. If humans gave away 40% of their food, many people would go hungry. Children would not have enough to eat. Old people would get sick and die. The Corithians did not care about any of this. For 300 years, humans had done what the alien empires told them to do. They worked in factories, fought in wars, and grew food. They built ships and fixed machines. They did all the hard work while the aliens lived easy lives. The galaxy had 3 big empires that controlled everything. The Corithian Empire had the best weapons and controlled the eastern part of space. They looked like giant insects with hard shells and sharp claws. They loved to fight and thought they were better than everyone else. The Vex Confederacy controlled all the trade routes and money in the center of the galaxy. They looked like tall, thin creatures with gray skin and big eyes. They only cared about making profit and getting rich. The Zethari Collective ruled the outer edge of space with their mind powers. They were made of living crystal and could read thoughts and control weak minds. They thought they were the smartest beings in the universe. All 3 empires had taken human worlds long ago. They divided up human space like pieces of a cake. Humans became workers, soldiers, and servants. The aliens never asked what humans wanted. They just took what they needed. Jake walked to another part of the control room and pressed some buttons. "Get me Admiral Pete Harrison at Luna Command," he told Amy. "We need to talk to him right now." Luna Command was the main human military, based near Earth's moon. Admiral Harrison was the highest-ranking human officer in space. If anyone could help solve this problem, it was him. While they waited for the connection, Jake thought about his own life. He grew up on a colony world called New Boston. His father worked in a factory making parts for Corithian warships. His mother grew vegetables that were shipped to Vex trade stations. Jake learned early that humans always gave their best work to the aliens and kept the leftovers for themselves. When Jake was 18, Corithian soldiers came to his world. They said the Empire needed more fighters for a war against some other aliens that Jake had never heard of. They took every young man and woman between 18 and 25. Jake never saw his home again. He fought in 3 different wars for the Corithians. He watched his human friends die for causes they did not understand. The Corithians promised that humans who fought well would be treated better, but it was a lie. After each war, humans went back to being workers and servants. Amy's voice broke into his thoughts. "I have Admiral Harrison on the line, sir." The big screen showed an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. Admiral Harrison had served in space for 40 years. He had seen everything the aliens could do to humans. "Jake, good to see you," Harrison said. "I guess you heard about the new Corithian demands." "Yes, sir, 40% of our food production. That's going to mean starvation for millions of our people." Harrison nodded slowly. "It's the same story everywhere, Jake. The Corithians want more food. The Vex want more factory workers. The Zethari want more scientists and engineers. They keep taking and we keep giving." Jake looked around his control room. His crew was listening to every word. These were good people who had worked hard their whole lives. They deserved better than this. "What are our options, Admiral?" Jake asked. "Well, we could try to negotiate. Ask them to take less. But you know how that usually goes." Jake did know. The aliens never negotiated with humans, they just made demands and expected obedience. If humans complained, The aliens would threaten to bomb their cities or take their children away. There might be another way, Harrison said quietly. I've been talking to other human leaders across the galaxy. We're all thinking the same thing. What's that, sir? What if we just said no? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Amy and the other crew members looked at each other with surprise. Humans had never said no to the alien empires before. Sir, with respect, they have bigger guns than we do, Jake said. They have more ships and better technology. If we fight them directly, they'll destroy us. Harrison smiled for the first time in the conversation. Who said anything about fighting, Jake? What if we just stopped working for them? Jake began to understand what the Admiral meant. Humans did all the real work in the galaxy. They ran the power plants that gave electricity to alien cities. They fixed the machines that kept alien ships flying. They grew the food that fed alien populations. They maintained the computers that ran alien governments. The aliens have spent 300 years making us do everything for them, Harrison continued. They don't know how to run their own systems anymore. They've forgotten how to do the basic work that keeps their empires running. Amy spoke up from her station. Commander, I'm getting reports from other human ships. Captain Lisa Wong on the horizon says the Vex are demanding her Marines fight in another trade war. Engineer Dan Cooper on New Terra says the Vex shut down his fusion plant because it was making too much power. And Dr. Kate Williams on Research Station 7 says the Zathari took all her medical research, added another crew member. They claimed that only superior species should have advanced knowledge. Jake felt something growing inside him. It was not fear or sadness like he usually felt when dealing with the aliens. It was anger, but also hope. For the first time in his life, he could see a way for humans to fight back that might actually work. Admiral, how many human leaders are willing to do this? Jake asked. All of them, Jake. Every colony, every ship, every station. We're all tired of being treated like animals. The question is, are you and your crew ready to say no more? Jake looked around at his crew. Amy nodded at him. The other officers stood up straighter. These people had families and friends who were suffering under alien rule. They were ready to take a risk for a chance at something better. Yes, sir, we're ready, Jake said. What do you need us to do? First, we spread the word to every human in your sector. Then we wait for my signal. When I give the order, every human in the galaxy stops working for the aliens at the same time. No more tribute, no more conscription, no more servitude. And if they threaten to attack us? Harrison's face became serious. Then we'll show them what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. The galaxy is about to learn that humans are not as helpless as we look. The communication ended, and Jake stood alone with his thoughts. In a few days or weeks, humanity would either win its freedom or face destruction. But for the first time in 3 centuries, they would face it as free, beings making their own choice. The breaking point had arrived. Admiral Pete Harrison stood in the main communication room on Luna Command. Behind him were 50 human leaders from every corner of the galaxy. Captains, governors, engineers, doctors, and farmers all stood together. Their faces showed the same thing. They were tired of being afraid. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. In a few minutes, Harrison would send a message that would reach every alien empire and every human settlement in known space. This message would change everything. Are we all ready for this? Harrison asked the group behind him. Governor Rachel Stone from the New Texas colony nodded. My people are starving because we give all our best food to the Corithians. We're ready. Captain Tony Brooks from the merchant fleet spoke next. The Vex take 70% of everything we earn from trade. Our families live in poverty while they get rich. We're ready too. Dr. Maria Santos from the medical research stations added, the Zathari steal every cure we discover. They let human children die from diseases we could treat, but they won't let us use our own medicine. We've been ready for years. Harrison looked at each face in the room. These people represented billions of humans across the galaxy. They had all suffered under alien rule. They had all lost friends and family to alien cruelty. Today, they would speak with one voice. Computer, open galaxy-wide transmission, Harrison ordered. Transmission ready, Admiral, came the reply. Begin recording. The camera focused on Harrison's weathered face. He had practiced these words many times, but his heart still beat fast. What he was about to say would either free humanity or destroy it. People of the galaxy, Harrison began. I am Admiral Pete Harrison of the Human Colonial Defense Force. I speak today for all human beings wherever they may live. On Carithian Prime, the capital world of the Carithian Empire, War Master Zektor was eating his morning meal when the transmission began. He looked like a giant mantis with armor-plated skin and eyes like black glass. He clicked his mandibles in amusement when he saw a human on his screen. For 300 years we have served faithfully, Harrison continued. We built your ships when you commanded us to build them. We fought your wars when you ordered us to fight. We grew your food when you demanded tribute. We powered your cities and ran your factories. Zektor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Humans had tried to rebel before. It always ended the same way, with human cities burning under Carithian orbital bombardment. These creatures never learned their place. We asked for nothing in return, except the basic rights that should belong to all thinking beings. The right to keep enough food to feed our children. The right to live in our own homes without fear. The right to learn and grow and make our own choices. In the Vex trade systems, Trade Minister Vel9 watched the transmission with his large, gray eyes. He was tall and thin like all Vex, with skin like old leather and fingers that ended in sharp points. He was already calculating numbers in his head. If the humans stopped working, the Vex would lose trillions of credits. But humans were weak and stupid creatures. They would come crawling back within a few weeks when they started going hungry. They always did. You gave us none of these things, Harrison said, his voice growing stronger. Instead, you treated us like animals. You took our children to fight in your armies. You stole our discoveries and called them your own. You worked us until we died, and then demanded we thank you for the privilege. On the crystal world of Zathari Prime, the collective consciousness felt the humans' words like a small vibration in their shared mind. The Zathari looked like living diamonds, their bodies made of clear crystal that reflected light in beautiful patterns. They could speak to each other with thoughts alone and believed this made them superior to all other life. The humans were becoming emotional again, the collective mind noted with disdain. Emotions were weakness. The Zathari had evolved beyond such primitive feelings. Soon they would use their mental powers to calm the humans down and make them return to work. Today, that ends, Harrison said, and his voice carried to every corner of space where intelligent beings lived. To the Carithian Empire, the Vex Confederacy, and the Zathari Collective, humanity delivers this message. No more. Zektor stopped laughing. Something in the human's voice had changed. This did not sound like the usual human begging and pleading. This sounded different. No more tribute. No more conscription. No more servitude. We hereby declare our independence from all treaties that treat us as anything less than equals. We withdraw our consent to be governed by those who see us as property rather than people. Vel9's calculations suddenly became more urgent. The human was not just complaining about working conditions. He was talking about complete economic separation. That would be catastrophic for Vex profits. Starting immediately, all human workers will cease operations in alien-controlled facilities. All human soldiers will lay down arms in alien conflicts. All human scientists and engineers will end their research for alien masters. All human farmers will keep their crops for human families. The Zathari collective mind buzzed with sudden concern. They had grown dependent on human research and human-maintained technology. If the humans actually carried through with this threat, it could cause serious problems. Harrison's image was now being watched by trillions of beings across the galaxy. Alien leaders who had never given humans a second thought were suddenly paying very close attention. We do not make this decision lightly, Harrison continued. We know you have bigger armies and more powerful weapons. We know you could destroy our worlds if you choose to do so. But we also know something you have forgotten. What could these animals possibly know that we do not? Zektor muttered to his advisors. We know that your empires run on human labor, We built the machines that make your cities work. We programmed the computers that control your ships. We designed the systems that keep your people alive. For 3 centuries, you made us do everything while you grew soft and lazy. Vel9 was now frantically calling his administrators. Get me reports on human worker dependency in all sectors. Immediately, he ordered. The numbers that came back made his gray skin turn even paler. You never learned to do the work yourselves because you always had us to do it for you. You never had to understand how your own technology works because humans maintained it for you. You lived like kings while we served as your hands and minds. The One Sithari Collective was conducting rapid assessments of their infrastructure. The results were disturbing. Humans operated 90% of their industrial facilities. Human technicians maintained their communication networks. Human scientists had developed most of their recent technological advances. Now you will learn. What happens when those hands and minds are no longer at your service, Harrison said. We are not declaring war on you. We are simply refusing to work for you any longer. We are going home to take care of our own people for a change. Harrison paused and looked directly into the camera. Across the galaxy, humans watching the transmission felt their hearts swell with pride and hope. For the first time in centuries, someone was standing up for them. To my fellow humans, wherever you are, whatever world you call home, the time has come to claim your dignity. Walk away from their factories. Leave their ships. Abandon their projects. Come home to your families and your own people. But Admiral, came a voice from behind him. It was Captain Ellen Parker from the Outer Rim colonies. What if they attack us for this? Harrison turned to include her in the transmission. Then they attack, he said simply. But they will be attacking people who chose to be free rather than slaves who accepted their chains. That makes all the difference. He turned back to the camera. To the alien empires, you have a choice. You can learn to treat us as equals and partners, or you can try to force us back into slavery. But understand this, the age of human servitude is over. From this day forward, humanity stands free. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, 3 great empires suddenly realized they were facing a crisis unlike anything in their long histories. The humans had not fired a shot, but they had just declared a war that could bring down civilizations. On Luna Command, Harrison looked at the faces around him. Well, he said quietly, we've crossed the line. There's no going back now. Outside, the station's windows, the first human ships were already changing course, heading home to human space. The refusal had begun. Captain Ben Martinez stood in front of the massive fusion reactor that powered the Carithian military base on Kepler 442b. The machine was as tall as a building and hummed with enough energy to light up an entire city. For 15 years, Ben and his team had kept this reactor running perfectly. Today, they were going to turn it off forever. Around him, 20 human engineers worked at control panels and computer stations. These were people Ben had known for years. They had families back on human worlds. They had children who deserved better than slavery. Today, they were finally going to give those children hope. Sue, start the shutdown sequence for reactor core, number 1, Ben ordered. Sue Palmer had worked on fusion reactors her whole adult life. Her father had been an engineer too, and his father before him. 3 generations of her family had served alien masters. She was going to make sure her daughter would not have to do the same. Core 1 shutdown initiated, Captain, Sue replied. Her hands moved quickly over the controls she knew by heart. Power output dropping to 90%. At the base command center, Carithian officers began to notice warning lights on their control boards. Sub-Commander Krathvel, who looked like a 7-foot-tall praying mantis covered in black armor, clicked his mandibles in annoyance. What is wrong with the power grid? He demanded of his aide. Unknown, sir. The humans in the reactor room are not answering our communications. Krathvel's compound eyes narrowed. He had heard about the human transmission 2 days ago, but had not taken it seriously. Humans were worker creatures. They did what they were told. The idea that they might actually rebel was ridiculous. Send guards to the reactor room immediately, he ordered. Back in the reactor chamber, Ben watched his team continue the shutdown. Core 2 is offline, reported Engineer Carlos Rivera. Core 3 ready for shutdown on your command. Do it, Ben said without hesitation. The base's power output dropped to 70%. Emergency lights began flashing in corridors throughout the facility. Corinthian soldiers found themselves trapped in elevators that no longer worked. Computer systems that controlled weapons and communications began failing one by one. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside the reactor room. Corinthian guards were coming, their clawed feet scraping against the metal floor. Ben knew they would arrive in minutes. "Sir, the Corinthians are demanding we restart the reactor immediately," Sue said, listening to angry voices over the communication system. "They're threatening to execute hostages." Ben's jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady on the controls. "Let them threaten. They can't run these systems without us, and they know it." Similar scenes were happening all across the galaxy. On Vex Trade Station Omega-7, Supervisor Mike Adams led 300 human dock workers away from their posts. Behind them, massive cargo ships worth billions of credits sat stranded in their berths. The Vex Overseer, a tall gray creature called NIM-8, screeched at the departing humans. "You cannot leave. The cargo must be moved, the schedule must be maintained." Mike turned around and looked at the alien with calm eyes. "Find someone else to do it." "There is no one else. Only humans know how to operate the loading systems." "Then, I guess your cargo is going to sit there for a while." NIM-8's large eyes bulged with rage. The Vex had spent centuries building trade networks that depended entirely on human workers. They had never bothered to learn how to load their own ships or operate their own equipment. It had seemed unnecessary when humans were so cheap and easy to control. Now, watching hundreds of humans walk away from billions of credits worth of stranded merchandise, NIM-8 began to understand what the human admiral had meant in his transmission. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Helen Ross was packing her research files on Zathari Research Station Alpha Prime. She had spent 10 years developing new medicines that could help both humans and aliens live longer, healthier lives. The Zathari had taken credit for all her work, while keeping the actual knowledge secret from other species. The Zathari Research Coordinator, a being of living crystal called Resonance Prime, materialized in her laboratory. Its voice spoke directly, in her mind without using sound. "Dr. Ross, you cannot remove those files. They contain vital research data." Helen continued packing without looking up. "Research that I did. Knowledge that I discovered. I'm taking it with me. The research belongs to the collective. We provided the laboratory and equipment, and I provided the brain that figured out how to use them. Without me, this equipment is just expensive junk." Resonance Prime's crystal body flickered with angry light. "You cannot synthesize the neural enhancement drugs without our psychic guidance. The process is too complex for primitive minds." Helen smiled and sealed the last container of research materials. "Actually, you can't synthesize them without my biochemical knowledge. I designed the entire process. You just watched and took notes." For the first time in its long existence, Resonance Prime felt something like fear. The Zathari had grown dependent on human scientists and engineers to develop new technology. They had focused so much on their mental powers that they had forgotten how to work with their hands or understand complex machines. Back on Kepler 442b, Corinthian guards finally reached the reactor room. They burst through the door with weapons drawn, expecting to find cowering humans ready to return to work. Instead, they found Ben Martinez and his team standing calmly by the shutdown controls. The fusion reactor was completely offline. The entire military base was running on emergency power that would last maybe 6 hours. "Restart the reactor immediately," ordered Guard Captain Thexmore in broken human language. "No," Ben replied simply. Thexmore raised his plasma rifle. "Restart or die." Ben looked at the weapon without flinching. "If you kill me, who's going to restart the reactor? Do you know how?" The guard captain hesitated. He knew nothing about human technology. None of the Corinthians did. They were warriors, not engineers. They conquered worlds and took what they wanted, but they had never learned to create or maintain anything themselves. "My engineers know the process," Sue Palmer added helpfully. "But if you hurt any of us, they'll refuse to help too. And if you kill all of us, this reactor becomes the most expensive piece of scrap metal in the galaxy." Thexmore's mandibles clicked with frustration. He could kill these humans easily, but that would not solve his problem. It would only make things worse. On Trade Station Omega-7, NIM-8 was having the same realization. He could force the humans to return to their posts at gunpoint, but people working under threat of death did not do good work. They made mistakes. They sabotaged equipment. They found ways to cause even more problems. Across the Zathari collective, similar scenes played out at research stations, manufacturing facilities, and communication centers. Human workers were leaving their posts and taking their knowledge with them. The crystalline beings tried to use their mental powers to force the humans to stay, but discovered that human minds could be surprisingly stubborn when they were angry. Enough. Within 72 hours, the three greatest empires in the galaxy were facing a crisis unlike anything in their histories. Power grids failed without human technicians to maintain them. Weapons systems shut down without human engineers to operate them. Communication networks went silent without human operators to run them. On Corithian Prime, War Master Zektor paced angrily in his command chamber. Half his fleet was stranded in orbit without human crews to run the complex navigation systems. His weapons factories had stopped producing ammunition because human workers had walked away from the assembly lines. How long before we can train our own people to replace the humans? He demanded of his advisors. The technical manuals are written in human languages, replied his chief aide. It could take years to translate them, and years more to train our people to understand the concepts. Trade Minister Vel 9 was receiving similar reports from across Vex space. Their entire economy was grinding to a halt without human workers to keep it running. Ships sat empty in spaceports. Factories stood silent. Even the computers that tracked their money required human programmers to function properly. The Zathari collective was perhaps in the worst situation of all. They had become so dependent on human innovation that their own technological advancement had almost stopped. Without human researchers and engineers, they faced the prospect of slowly falling behind every other species in the galaxy. War Master Zektor made a decision that went against every instinct he had. He opened a communication channel to Admiral Harrison on Luna Command. "Human Admiral," he said, struggling to keep the anger out of his voice. "We need to discuss terms." Similar messages were being sent from Vex and Zathari leadership. The humans had not fired a single shot, but they had brought 3 galactic empires to their knees in less than a week. The shutdown was complete, and the aliens were finally beginning to understand what they had lost. General Alex Carter stood in the command center of New Geneva Station, watching the galaxy fall apart on his screens. The holographic displays showed red warning lights across hundreds of star systems. Trade routes were going dark. Military fleets sat powerless in space. Entire civilizations were losing basic services like electricity and water. It had been 3 weeks since Admiral Harrison's message. 3 weeks since humans had walked away from their jobs across the galaxy. The results were more devastating than anyone had imagined. "The Corithians are trying to replace us with workers from their client species," reported Intelligence Officer Megan Torres. She was a small woman with dark hair who had spent years studying alien military capabilities. "It's not working. Their technology is so designed for human operators that they can't adapt it fast enough." Carter nodded grimly. The aliens had made a critical mistake during their centuries of rule. They had built their entire civilization around having humans do all the technical work. Now they were discovering that you could not simply replace 300 years of human knowledge overnight. "What about the Vex?" Carter asked. "Even worse situation," Megan replied. "Their entire economy was built on human labor being cheap and reliable. They're trying to use robots and automated systems, but those were all programmed by humans too. Half their automated systems have shut down because they need human maintenance codes to keep running." On the main screen, Carter could see a live feed from the Vex trade hub at Centauri Station. Normally, the station would be buzzing with activity, as thousands of ships loaded and unloaded cargo. Now it looked like a ghost town. Empty ships floated in their berths while expensive goods rotted in storage containers that no one knew how to open. Captain Steve Robinson was leading a convoy of human transport ships away from Zathari space at that very moment. His ships carried hundreds of thousands of human colonists who were finally going home to human-controlled worlds. Steve had been worried that Zathari pursuit ships would try to stop them, but his fears had proven groundless. "This is Convoy Leader Robinson to New Geneva Command." Steve's voice came over the radio. "We're 3 days out from Zathari space and no sign of pursuit. The Zathari ships can't follow us because their navigation systems were programmed by humans. When we left, we took the access codes with us." Carter smiled at the irony. The Zathari had thought they were so smart with their crystal bodies and mental powers. They could read minds and manipulate thoughts, but they had never learned how to program a simple navigation computer. They had always had humans to do that for them. "Any word from the Zathari leadership?" Carter asked Megan. "They're in full panic mode. Their collective consciousness is having trouble maintaining itself because their communication network is failing. Turns out their psychic abilities work fine for short distances, but they need human-built relay stations to connect their minds across star systems." Meanwhile, Commander Julie Parker was coordinating the evacuation of human settlements. From Vex territory, she had expected the Vex to try to stop the evacuation with their merchant marine vessels, but the alien ships had proven to be helpless without human crews. "Julie Parker to New Geneva," came her transmission. "The Vex are sending ships to intercept our evacuation convoys, but their vessels keep breaking down. Apparently, their ships are so computerized that they need human technicians to keep them running. Without us, they're just flying metal boxes." Carter had to admire the completeness of humanity's victory. They had not needed to fire a single shot. The aliens had made themselves so dependent on human knowledge and labor that simply walking away had been enough to cripple 3 galactic empires. "Sir, we're getting reports from our intelligence network," said Lieutenant Bobby Chen from his communication station. "The Corithian military is in complete chaos. Half their fleet is stranded because the navigation computers are locked with human security codes. The other half is stuck in port because they don't have human mechanics to service the engines." Carter walked to another display that showed the Corithian home system. Normally, it would be filled with the movement of military ships and supply convoys. Now it looked almost empty. The few ships that were moving seemed to be drifting aimlessly. "What about their weapons production?" Carter asked. "Shut down completely," Bobby replied. "They're trying to get their weapons factories running again, but the manufacturing equipment was designed by humans and requires human operators. They're finding out that you can't just point a gun at someone and make them understand advanced engineering." The situation was similar across Vex space. Trade Minister Vel 9 had tried everything he could think of to get commerce moving again. He had offered huge payments to any species that could replace human workers. He had threatened clients who refused to do business with the Vex. He had even tried to recruit pirates and criminals to crew his ships. Nothing worked. The galaxy's economy had been built around human expertise, and that expertise could not be replaced quickly or easily. "Megan, what's the status on Zathari research facilities?" Carter asked. "Complete shutdown. Dr. Helen Ross and her team took all their research data when they left. The Zathari are discovering that their psychic powers don't help much when it comes to understanding biochemistry and molecular engineering. They're basically back to the Stone Age in terms of scientific research." Carter thought about how completely the situation had reversed. 3 weeks ago, humans had been servants and slaves. Now the former masters were begging for help from species they had once considered inferior. "Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Harrison," announced Bobby Chen. Harrison's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but satisfied. Behind him, Carter could see other human leaders working at computer stations. "Alex, how are things on your end?" Harrison asked. "Better than expected, Admiral. The alien empires are falling apart faster than we thought possible. It's almost too easy." Harrison nodded. "That's what happens when you build your entire civilization on the backs of people you consider inferior. The aliens got lazy and forgot how to do anything for themselves." "What's our next move?" Carter asked. "We wait. The aliens are starting to realize that they need us more than we need them. We've already received communication requests from all 3 empires asking for negotiations." "Are we going to negotiate?" Harrison's expression became serious. "On our terms this time. No more slavery. No more treating humans like property. If they want our help, They're going to have to accept us as equals. While they talked, the collapse continued across the galaxy. On Carithian Prime, War Master Zektor was dealing with riots in his own cities. Without human workers to maintain the power grid, large sections of the capital were experiencing blackouts. Without human farmers to grow food, supply shortages were becoming critical. The Carithians had always solved problems with force, but you could not shoot your way out of a technological breakdown. You needed knowledge and skill, and they had given all of that to humans. In Vex space, Trade Minister Vel 9 was watching his civilization's economy collapse in real time. Centuries of accumulated wealth meant nothing when you could not transport goods or maintain your infrastructure. The Vex had focused so much on making money that they had forgotten how to make anything else. The Zathari collective was perhaps suffering the most. Their shared consciousness was fragmenting as communication relays failed. Individual Zathari were finding themselves cut off from the collective mind for the first time in their lives. Many were going insane from the isolation. Admiral, we're receiving reports that some alien worlds are starting to experience complete societal breakdown, Megan Torres reported. Food riots, power failures, government collapse, the situation is getting desperate for them. Harrison looked thoughtful. We didn't want to destroy them completely. We just wanted them to treat us with respect. Maybe it's time to show them what that respect looks like, Carter suggested. Agreed. Open a channel to all 3 Empire capitals. It's time to offer them a way out of this mess. As the transmission began, Carter reflected on how completely the galaxy had changed. 3 weeks ago, humans had been the servants. Now they held the power to save or destroy entire civilizations. The collapse was complete, but perhaps it was time to start building something better. President Emma Clark stood before the largest gathering of different species the galaxy had ever seen. The Great Hall on Earth could hold 50,000 beings, and every seat was filled. Humans sat next to former Carithian warriors. Vex traders talked quietly with Zathari researchers. Representatives from dozens of smaller species watched from the upper levels. 6 months had passed since Admiral Harrison's Declaration of Independence. 6 months since humans had walked away from 3 centuries of servitude. The galaxy had changed completely in that short time. Emma looked out at the crowd and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had been elected president of the new United Human Government just 2 months ago. Her first job had been to help create something that had never existed before, a truly fair government for all species. People of the galaxy, Emma began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall and to billions more watching on screens across space. We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, not as masters and servants, but as equals united in a common purpose. In the front row sat former War Master Zektor of the Carithian Empire. The proud warrior looked very different than he had 6 months ago. His black armor was gone, replaced by simple civilian clothes. His compound eyes showed something that had never been there before: humility. The collapse of Carithian infrastructure had been swift and total. Without human engineers to maintain their war machines, the mighty Carithian military had become useless metal. Without human farmers to grow food, their worlds had faced starvation. Zektor had been forced to choose between his pride and his people's survival. He had chosen his people. We did not seek to destroy the old empires, Emma continued. We sought only to free ourselves from systems that treated thinking beings as property. When those systems collapsed under their own weight, we chose to help rather than to conquer. Next to Zektor sat Vel 9, former trade minister of the Vex Confederacy. The tall gray alien had spent the last 6 months learning a hard lesson about economics. It turned out that all the money in the galaxy meant nothing if you did not have people who knew how to do actual work. The Vex had tried everything to restart their economy without human help. They had hired mercenaries, built robots, and even attempted to enslave other species. Nothing had worked. Their technology was too complex and too specialized for anyone but humans to operate. Finally, Vel 9 had swallowed his pride and asked for human assistance. But this time, the terms had been very different. Today we established the Galactic Cooperative, Emma announced. A union where no species rules over another. where every being has a voice in the decisions that affect their lives, where strength comes from working together rather than from forcing others to submit. In the third row, the crystal form of Resonance Prime reflected the lights of the hall in beautiful patterns. The Zethari had perhaps suffered the most during the collapse. Their collective consciousness had fragmented when their communication networks failed. Many Zethari had experienced individual thought for the first time in their lives. Some had gone insane from the isolation. Others had discovered that having their own thoughts and feelings was actually liberating. Resonance Prime was one of the latter group. It had learned to appreciate the value of different perspectives and ideas. Admiral Harrison, now serving as Secretary of Defense for the Cooperative, watched from the side of the hall. He had seen humanity go from slaves to liberators in just 6 months. The transformation still amazed him sometimes. The Cooperative had not been built through conquest or force. It had grown naturally as species realized that cooperation worked better than domination. The Corithians brought their military expertise to protect cooperative worlds from pirates and raiders. The Vex contributed their knowledge of trade and economics. The Zethari shared their scientific research freely with all members. Each member species of the Cooperative maintains control over their own worlds and their own people, Emma explained. But when we face common challenges, exploration, defense, scientific research, we work together as partners rather than as competitors. Captain Jake Sullivan sat with the other military officers in the hall. He now commanded the CSS Harmony, one of the first ships designed and built by multiple species working together. His crew included humans, Corithians, Vex, Zethari, and members of a dozen other species. They worked together as a team, each contributing their unique strengths. Jake remembered his old ship, the Defiance, and how desperate things had seemed just 6 months ago. Back then, humanity had faced a choice between continued slavery and probable destruction. The idea that they would end up as leaders of a galactic government had seemed impossible. The Cooperative fleet now protects over 300 worlds. Emma continued, "Our ships are crewed by volunteers from every member species. Our captains are chosen based on ability and character, not on what species they belong to." Dr. Helen Ross sat with the scientific delegation. She had returned to her research, but now she worked for all species instead of just one. Her medical discoveries were shared freely throughout cooperative space. Diseases that had killed millions were now curable. Genetic conditions that had caused suffering for generations were being eliminated. The Zethari had been surprised to learn that human scientists were willing to share their knowledge freely. Under the old Empire system, information had been hoarded and controlled. In the Cooperative, knowledge belonged to everyone. Our research stations have made more scientific advances in 6 months than the old empires made in 50 years. Emma said, "When brilliant minds work together instead of in isolation, amazing things become possible." Trade Minister Vel 9 had been shocked to discover that honest fair trade was actually more profitable than the exploitation he had practiced under the old system. When everyone benefited from economic activity, there was more wealth for everyone to share. The Cooperative had established trade routes that connected species that had never interacted before. Worlds that had been isolated under the old Empire system were now thriving centers of commerce and culture. The Cooperative Council represents over 400 species, Emma announced, from the largest civilizations to the smallest colony. Worlds every voice is heard, every perspective is valued. Former War Master Zektor had been amazed to discover that many of his former enemies actually respected Corithian military traditions and skills. In the Cooperative, his people had found a new purpose, protecting others instead of conquering them. Corithian warriors now served alongside former slaves, united in the cause of justice and peace. Emma looked out at the diverse crowd and felt hope for the future. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still pirates, criminals, and a few holdout empires that refused to join the Cooperative. But for the first time in centuries, most beings in the galaxy lived in freedom and dignity. 6 months ago, humanity said no more to 3 centuries of oppression, Emma concluded. We did not know what would come next. We only knew that we could not continue to live as slaves. She paused and looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting her words across the galaxy. Today, I can say with certainty that we made the right choice. The galaxy we have built together is better than anything that came before. It is a place where every being can reach their full potential, where cooperation replaces domination, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. The hall erupted in applause that included the clicking of Carithian mandibles, the whistling of Vex vocal cords, and the musical ringing of Zathari crystals. Hundreds of different species celebrated together as equals. Admiral Harrison smiled as he watched the celebration. Humanity had said no more to oppression, and in doing so had created something wonderful. The day humans refused to be slaves had become the day the galaxy learned to be free. The new order had begun, and it was better than anyone had dared to imagine.